our counselors, the social workers that we do have, and our psychologists. And then it's calls to the 211 hotline, police, or medical. So that leads us to some data, which we just wanted to share. At the high school level, we took a snapshot of the mid-year point. So in just backtrack, in 16-17 at the high school level, we had 33 major crisis interventions with students. And as of December, that midpoint snapshot of this year, we had a record 29 that had occurred. That's on pace to put us at the end of this year at 58 students that we've had to intervene with in a major way, which takes, at times multiple staff to intervene. That's at the high school level. At the middle school level, 16-17, we had 26 major crisis interventions. And as of the midpoint this year, December, we've had a record 27 that had occurred, which is putting us on pace for 54. Mr. Daigle mentioned that 50% of students at a very young age are dealing with mental health issues. A lot of that goes unnoticed. It's our job to not let it go unnoticed and to support those students.
Can you, just real quick, on this page here you're talking about major crises, and the previous page you talked about defining a crisis.
Yeah, major crisis being those four items. Students that are dealing with one or all of those four items. Sometimes they're...
So a crisis and a major crisis are the same thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those four areas right there.
Thank you.
At the elementary level, students with the highest need are seen on an individual level, but that does not allow time for small group intervention, where you could pull together some small group students because of the minimal hours that are at the elementary level, and I'll show you a chart in just a minute of what those hours look like currently across the district. Also, when a crisis occurs, you might have a social worker or staff member that gets pulled from one school, if they're shared between buildings, which we have many of, shared between buildings, pulled out of what they might be dealing with in one place to go deal with the situation over at the other building because it might be of more significant nature. And lastly, there's limited amounts of available mental health support to lead to school psychologists providing support and services that would typically not be provided by them in any given day and would be provided by a social worker or somebody else. So we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're pulling staff members to do other jobs when they should be doing their job. Just a chart to break down the current hours of what we have. You can see at the elementary level, 0 to 3 hours per week for each of the schools would fall right in that realm around the 2 to 3 hour mark. At the high school level, high school is split. 30 hours are split between almost 1,100 students and the high school therapeutic program, which provides supports to our students that have some significant behavioral needs. So 15 hours, over 1,000 students, and 15 hours to the therapeutic program. And at the middle school, we have 20 hours that's allotted to 800 plus students at that level. So pretty significant numbers that we are really working and looking to increase. Well, a few other pieces of data for you. As you look across our DIRG and you kind of compare us to school districts that are of the same size, and we highlighted 3 of them there, Berlin, Bethel, and Waterford. You can see the number of social workers that they have compared to us in the middle. Waterford in particular has a social worker at every building. We have 1.5 across our entire district currently. Same size district as Berlin, Bethel, and Waterford. Ironic too that Berlin is the exact same number of students that we have as positioned on this chart. And then if you look at that ratio as well, we more than double the number of students to a professional staff member when we look at providing support. So you can see 1,854 students to one staff member if you break that down proportionally across our entire district in comparison to those other districts that are listed there. And just our focus is to move from a reactive to a proactive model, and this budget is here to help that. And I'm not going to read both of these, but really just to define the role of a social worker and the role of a school psychologist. Right now they're very blurred. and we're looking to pull those apart and really allow a social worker, and you see in that first bullet, to implement that home-to-school connection. So very important that we have that in place, and we build upon that to address students' mental health and make sure we're getting to students who might be dealing with things internally that we might not ever know about. So we're looking for staff to help out with that. So how do we do it? Well, we're not just here to say we need to bring forth a request for $208,684. Everything we do, we're trying to repurpose and reallocate funds. So the social worker component, an additional 2.7. That 2.7 breaks down to one full-time additional at the high school, an additional half-time at the middle school level, and then an additional 0.4, 0.4, and 0.4. So almost half-time at each of the elementary schools. But the 0.4 in the additional 2 hours there would make it almost having a half-time person each at the elementary level. Total initiative, again, $208,000. We have a staffing cost reduction. We are aware of where our enrollment is. We're monitoring that year to year. Enrollment is planning, to go up, but as of right now, we still have a little bit of a decline. So we can reduce 2 certified staff members, 1 teacher at the elementary level and 1 teacher at the high school, to make sure we're adhering to those enrollment numbers. Using that savings of $152,320 allows a total impact of only $56,364 to bring in that level of support for our students with a social worker and school psychologist. We feel very strongly over the many months that we have been working and focused on this budget that we've built a fiscally responsible budget that we're sharing with you and have shared with you this evening. One that supports our needs, is the lowest budget request that we have asked for since my time here in East Lyme, and many of our new administrators and to all of their efforts and work. And again, I'll go back to that zero-based budgeting component. Really has helped drive us forward, and we've been very open and transparent with that as well. Next steps, as you're aware, we've got the public hearing on April 30th, town meeting in May on the 14th, and then the town referendum on the 24th. So with that, we will open it up to Mrs. Stevens is here, our Director of Finance Marketing and Growth Management, and we can answer any questions that you might have. So any questions about the slides at all? First of all, I'm up here that I need to go back to, or?
Just on slide 19, can you again say how you're going to allocate the heads that you're proposing? I know you said 0.4, 0.4, 0.4 for the grade schools.
Yes, this is current right now. So if we add to this now 2.7, 2.7 is going to put an increase of a 0.4 person, so almost a half-time person at each of the elementary schools. So 0.4 plus 0.4 plus 0.4. And then a 1.0 addition at the high school level, and then a 0.5 at the middle school level. Add all that up, it equals 2.7. So that's the breakdown of what this 2.7 FTE increase of social worker time would look like.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions about the presentation? No, I guess we're going with the presentation.
Okay.
I do.
Oh,
Jeff, on page 7, where you list the cost saving and avoidance measures.
Yes.
Some of these were repeated from last year. So,
A few.
for example, if I look at the high deductible health
Yes.
plan.
We've mentioned that. Yes.
Right, and last year you said that would save the district $137,000. So, are we really going to save anything this year?
I don't have the answer to that because claims have gone up significantly, as Mrs. Johnson had mentioned.
So this
I
is
think
really
it's more of an avoidance, as I mentioned, because if we weren't part of the high deductible health plan now, and on the traditional PPO plan, our insurance costs would be higher with that plan versus the plan that we're on now. So I think the high deductible health plan has helped to offset additional costs. I know initially we had planned out when we first brought this in. I had a number of about 207,000 that we were looking at the first year, but we can't control claims, as we know.
Okay. Also on that slide with the food service program change, you said you had a $50,000 swing.
Yeah.
You went from a $30,000 deficit to a $20,000 plus profit. And we're only 10 weeks into the calendar year. Is that the calendar year?
No, that's from the beginning of the school year
So-
to now.
So, do you have plans for that intended savings there?
Well, that you never want to have a huge. You can't have a huge amount of food service cushion. That's there for if a stove goes or we have to replace a slicer or something. Of those items are very expensive.
So there's a
items,
special account for this program.
That's right.
Where any profits that you receive from that program just get put into a special fund.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it can't be used for anything else.
Okay. And also the switch from oil propane to natural gas. Did that also happen last year, or is that new this year?
That's in process. The central office building was just switched over in November. The pool is online with that as well. And Flanders with the school projects will be rolling over from oil to natural gas. We have that natural gas line that runs, like the high school right now runs on natural gas. The middle school and Haynes run on natural gas. So we will have all of our buildings on natural gas other than Nyack Center after all said and done. Because the gas line just doesn't run that far into the south side of town.
Okay, thank you. And one final question. So with regard to the number of social workers, so there's really three types of personnel. There's social workers, there's school psychologists, in addition to school counselors, or are you calling the psychologists the school counselors?
No,
They're all
there's
separate.
At the middle school and high school level, you have guidance counselors. You have 3 guidance counselors at the middle school. You have 6 guidance counselors at the high school level. These are different. Social workers and school psychologists are separate.
And there's one counselor at each of the elementary schools, correct?
No, there's not. They don't have counselors or guidance counselors at the elementaries. They have the minimal psychology support, and they have the minimal social worker support that was mentioned. They
Now,
do
was
not
that
have
was that a
counselors.
change from last year? Because I thought last year, when we asked about the guidance counselors at each of the schools, there was one at full-time at each of the elementary schools?
No, not at the elementary level. No, we've
Okay.
never had guidance counselors at the elementary level. It's middle school and high school only.
Okay. And we're on page 20, where you're comparing the amount of social workers that we have relative to how many students. Do we have more counselors than other areas? For example, I'm not really clear on what the responsibilities of these positions are. So, for example, do other districts have a lesser amount of counselors on staff because they're not able to properly do a psychological evaluation?
No, I think.
Or are you saying that they have all of these social workers, but you would say that they're on par with our counselors?
Exactly.
Yeah, the guidance
Yeah.
counselors.
Yeah.
So do they have less guidance counselors because they put more of a focus on these positions?
No, we're deficient in these 2 areas only of social worker and psychologist, across the district. If you go to this slide on 22, it kind of breaks down those 2 roles. This is not what your typical guidance counselor will do. At the high school level, your guidance counselor is doing a whole number of things. Yes, they do deal with students who come in to their office, and they might designate them to the social worker, or they might take it on themselves right now because we don't have that person there on that given day, sort of thing. But they're also dealing with a number of other things, college admissions, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So.
Is it possible to get a comparison of that position as well?
Sure. Yeah, we can easily pull that information.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That's all with the presentation. Thank you.
All right, anybody else have questions on the presentation?
I do a couple. Jeff, projected, I know we had the student enrollment projections, but if I just wanted to get to numbers, what's the projection? What's the current number of students this year and the current projection for next year?
For this year, we're sitting right around a little over 2,700 students. Projected out, I believe we're supposed to drop about 50 more students, and then the swing starts to go back.
50 or 15?
50.
So next year's projections are down 50 kids.
And don't quote me on that number, we can pull a projection sheet, yeah, we'll look it up, but that's, at the top of my head, Lisa, that's the number that's sitting there. I also have it. Yeah, we're supposed to have one more year of a decline, and then, as you can see, those numbers start to climb back up. So, yeah, 27, right around 2,700 students. It was a change this year of about 50 students.
Okay. What's the change in administrator positions, if any, between last year and what's projected to go forward?
Administratively, we've needed to keep the same structure in place. I mean, nothing has changed in their job description. They're still doing a whole number of evaluations.
Okay.
And nothing has changed in their world. And given the fact that we're going to be on the upswing, we need to keep that structure in place.
And if I understood this right, the numbers for teachers are going to be down by 2 next year.
Yes, high
And
school
That's
and elementary.
district-wide.
One at the high school and one at the elementary
Okay,
level.
down 2.
Yes. And that's, again, how the enrollments play out and the numbers play out. We're able to have a reduction when you map out all the students across, for the class sizes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all I have for right now.
Okay.
John, question?
Yeah, you had mentioned, Jeff, the Coastal Connection program.
Yes.
Do you know off the top of your head what that tuition cost is and what we would get
Yes.
per student?
Yes, sitting right around 18 to 19,000?
Nope.
18 to 19,000 for outplaced students coming in. So it's higher than our typical, about $4,000 higher than our typical tuition cost for a student to be coming over, just because it's a higher level of service.
And do you know the number at this point of students that we have in that program?
We are sitting right around 23, 24 students in the program. The problem we run into in the space that they're in right now, which is an off-site location, like last year, for instance, we went up to 26. We couldn't really get any bigger because of and you could squeeze in, but it's not a huge space. So we really have to continue to do some work. If we really want to try and expand that further, we're going to have to find another location. And, we pay an off-site rental for that. It costs us, I think it's about $30,000 for that off-site location. It'd be great to try and maybe bring them, on site at some point in the future and expand the program. But right now we don't have the space right now, and with enrollment going back up, it becomes problematic as well over the years ahead. But we'll see what we can do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that it?
For now, yeah, thanks.
Okay, Camille.
I did have 2 follow-up questions.
Sure.
Jeff, please. When I look at the budget book that we received from the town, it shows that the Board of Education budget is slightly different than what you present here. I'm going to assume that what you gave us is the real number.
Yes. Yeah. In that red, in the red
Did you
binder.
have that question
I had the
too?
same question as well.
Yeah.
Concerning the budget.
So what you
packet.
have in the town,
Is lower than what you presented to us this evening. Not by much. I'm not talking a couple $1,000.
Yeah, about $2,000 difference.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will assume that the book that we received from the finance director has an incorrect number, and this is correct.
yeah, please go by this right there. That one
Okay.
has it right. That's our
Okay.
final approved board guide.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And then one additional question regarding the administrators. I do see that you show a reduction of 1.5 personnel.
Overall, you're talking when you look at,
Overall.
all overall.
But I did notice that the number for 17-18 that you are reporting on this sheet is actually 8 FTEs higher than what you reported to us last year.
I don't know which sheet you're referring to. I mean,
So
which-
Mariana,
Can I go back to that other question?
sure.
So I have 47,776,943.
Oh, say that again?
I have 47,776,943.
That's the BOE, right.
He's got 47,776,943 on here. Where is it?
Yeah,
That's
sorry.
part of the big budget.
I can show it to you.
Oh, okay, not from us.
not from you.
Oh, okay, yes.
So I wasn't sure,
These all matched.
but
Okay, so I don't know what you have there. Okay.
so we have a consolidated budget that combines the Board of Ed
Okay, so you
plus the municipal budget, the
Okay.
town
Okay,
part of
sorry.
it,
I thought you meant.
and it's $2,000 off.
Yeah.
So, no, nothing, your numbers tie. You're good.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, so.
That's okay, that's fine. So, getting back to these,
Yeah, your staffing question.
the staffing question. So last year, when we had asked for headcount information with regard to administrators, it was reporting that fiscal year 2018 had a headcount of 528.68.
That's all staff across the
All staff.
district, yeah.
And on the newest sheet that we received for the head count for 2018, you're showing 500 or I have this backwards.
Yeah. And I can tell you why.
Yeah, so
Why
did
there's an
those-
increase.
So
We
so
have.
let me
Yeah,
so
go
let
ahead.
me just finish my point. I did have that backwards. Last year you reported 520. This year it's 528.
It's going
So
up.
when you compare 528 to the projected 527, it looks like you're down 1.5. But in my mind, you're up 6.5. So
Well, we're up because of contracted services. Remember, we were here, case in point, our food services. We paid a significant amount of money, to Chartwell's for running our food service program. Got rid of that, brought in our own food service director. That's a headcount increase. Contracted services is another.
Others, so there were the food services people, and I'll pull up that spreadsheet in a second and give you the count. Food services, and then we had 3 people that were contracted services, but we had to bring them on as employees. So they were still, there's no change in the services, it's just, we had to change them from independent contractors to employees.
so for example, what positions?
I'm not saying.
A behavior analyst,
Outfit, yeah.
and an occupational therapist, and a speech therapist.
Now, does that have something to do with payroll laws? Because you're working primarily 100% for our school district?
It- They should be employees.
Our
They should-
employees.
They should be
Okay.
our employees
Yeah.
versus independent contractors.
Yeah,
Okay,
They
so-
were independent contractors. We brought them on under our domain. So that raises that FTE number.
So that's where the extra 8 positions
That's where
came
you're
in
seeing-
between
exactly.
food service and some and some contractors that were actually brought on board. Is that a wash in the budget? So
Yeah.
normally you would pay more for an independent contractor than you would for an employee, but when you have an employee, you have increases in benefits. Is it a wash?
The
Is it
individuals are
more?
not receiving, the individuals have waived benefits, so there's no increase other than our portion of the payroll taxes, so it's not a big increase.
Okay.
And we feel that they're now our employees. You have a little bit more vested, and we know who we have with a contracted service. The person could be pulled by the contractor and placed somewhere
Right.
else. We get a new person. It's a better service model, we feel.
It's a great service model. However, you don't exactly have a flex workforce then. So as projected numbers for enrollment increase or decrease, it's really hard to flex with those. That's the downside. But no doubt it's a greater level of service.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions on the presentation? Go ahead.
Jeff,
Yes.
on slide 11.
Yes.
On contracts, you mentioned buses.
Yes.
When you negotiate contracts, you look at how many students ride on a bus. Is there a minimum amount of students on a bus you have to have?
Well, generally a bus will fit at least between 70 and 80 students, including backpacks and so forth. It's tough when you talk about busing. Across our district, we have bus runs that we run the high school run, then you run the middle school run, and then you run the elementary run, one right after the other. If we had a lesser number of students on a bus at the high school, so let's say we tried to eliminate that bus, you still need it and you still pay for it because it's needed at the middle school and the elementary level, the way that it works. Also, we're mandated to provide transportation to every student. So if a parent, we have many parents that drive their children to school every day. That could change from one week to the next. We're mandated to be able to have a bus that's there and providing services. We do, continue to look at our busing contract. We're actually in year,
It's
our last year. Yeah, so we're going to be renegotiating that contract. Hopefully, maybe we can get a better deal. We'll see.
So if you find that, say, a bus normally carries 30 students and all of a sudden it's only carrying 5, what do you do?
Well, you can't, let's say at the high school, it's only carrying 5, and that would never be the case. But if it was carrying, hypothetically, if it was carrying 5
Right.
students, we still have to pay for it because we're using it for the middle school and the elementary runs. That same bus is being used at the other runs. So that's, we've talked about, could we just eliminate, a bus here at this level, but you still have to pay for it. So it's still there. And I know, sometimes we have folks that are driving around town and they might see a bus that looks half empty. What they don't realize is it might have just dropped off 15
That would be me.
kids. I knew that's where you're going with that question, John. But that sometimes is what happens. You see it pulling out of the parking lot. It might have dropped off. And really, there are clusters of neighborhoods where 10 kids might get out and get dropped off, sort of thing, and they go on to the next.
You said you might be able to coordinate with Waterford or Lyme.
That's for more special services, special education
Okay.
transportation. Not to say that you couldn't try and do, if let's say Waterford was on the same contract cycle that we're on, being that we're in the last year of our transportation contract. Unfortunately, they're not. I know they just went through it, I think, this past year, I believe, right? Yeah. But you could try and go out to bid as 2 different districts. Might work. It's the problem of everybody's on different contract cycles.
Right.
That's the issue. But
Okay.
we're hoping for a good negotiation. We'll see what we get for some contracts or for some bidders when we start the process.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Couple follow-ups. So, let's keep talking about buses. I can smell the diesel fume now.
Can you get the cost to go down in diesel?
Oh, what's the cost of one bus a year?
I don't know off the top of my head. Lisa, do we know?
It's,
I want to say 50. Am I
the cost of, I'm sorry.
running one bus?
One bus, currently, the type 1 bus is $285.15. So that would be the typical bus you would see per day, $285.
Oh, I was going to say,
No, per day.
Per day.
Jeez.
Per day.
$285 a day.
Per day, that's next year's price, the 18-19
Ouch.
price. That would be the buses you typically would see. Then there's the type 2 bus, which is the smaller bus with, special ed, for special ed students. That's $271.42 per day.
So,
Times, yeah.
how motivated are you to become a little more efficient with buses?
Well, we haven't started those conversations about the new renegotiations, but it's forthcoming. So yeah, we're
So
we're always motivated to try and save money, Lisa.
Right.
That's for sure. So we'll look at it all.
So who's got the calculator handy? So 180 school days times 280.
182.
I can't use an
182.
HP calculator.
Okay, what do you want? What do you want?
It's $1,089,843 for the regular school buses for the year. That doesn't
I'm just
count-
looking for one bus, though. Like, if we were to reduce the fleet by one bus,
Times 180.
Yeah.
what would be the
282
impact?
times 182.
How many? 50,000.
Yeah.
Oh, that was my gut guess, 50,000 per bus. Nice.
Which is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Does that include, that doesn't
No,
include
that does
fuel?
not include
You gotta
fuel.
You could add the fuel into it.
That doesn't.
Okay, so 60 grand a year. Does that include the driver too, or now he's already in the pool?
No, that's all included. They throw in the driver for.
So I'm being a little painstaking here because I have the same observation John has, and I understand your explanation of we need to provide buses for kids. I get it, but increasingly when I go by schools, there's an enormous queue of cars of parents dropping
There are.
off their kids.
There are. If you can
And
encourage them to send their kids on the bus, I'd appreciate it. But
Well, I don't know what the answer is, but it sounds like maybe there needs to be some communication with our parents. Maybe we can ask them for commitments. If they prefer to transport their children, that's great. I don't know what the answer is, and I'm not really looking to
it's-
triage it here.
I know, but we're mandated by law to have to provide it. Yeah, we're mandated by law. We
Well,
have
all right.
to. But I'll tell you what we are doing. Let me share one thing with you. In the redistricting process, we're really remapping our entire bus transportation at the elementary level. So there could be, maybe some efficiencies in bus usage for across the elementary schools.
I don't know if that's part of the equation to determine.
Yep.
I'm just saying that, that's a lot of money to save that we could,
Yeah.
that I really think we have a responsibility to
Well,
poke at.
think about it, though. If we, at the smaller scale, if we shared a special services transport with another district, and remember I mentioned $50,000 to transport a student.
Even more
I mean,
gravy.
Yeah, exactly. That's where we want to really try and tackle first, because it's a much easier animal to wrestle. And I think there's some availability out there. So we just need to continue to coordinate with districts.
All right, so when you do the redistricting, will you guys look at trying to
All
pick
the
up
mapping.
some efficiencies in the busing? 'Cause
Absolutely, yeah. All the
I
mapping
think
will be
that's
looked
really
at.
important.
Yes.
All right, my next question is, how long do we have Learn?
Learn the Learn program that we currently have.
Yeah, they're at
Uh,
Lily B right now,
They are at
renting
Lily B.
space.
We take in revenue of about $63,000
Mhm.
for the use of those 9 classrooms that they have over there. I can't really give you an exact timeline, but I can say that they are in the process of opening up, a new site in New
Right.
London. And they could be moving for the beginning of next school year. It could wait until as late as January of next school year. That's what we really know as of right now. It might fall somewhere in between. So we'll have them for potentially part of next school year.
Can that space be used for Coastal Connections?
Well, that hasn't been explored yet. It could be used for any number of things. I think everything should be on the table as we look at that. I mean, we've also talked about trying to expand our preschool program. We have a creative preschool program. 2 classrooms are being used, and a third that they use as kind of a half office and storage. If we were able to expand that, that's some maybe a few additional tuition dollars. Not huge, but could be. Full day preschool someday, maybe, but there's lots of different options, Lisa, that we could look at, and that being one of them. Also, there might be interest from Learn or another organization that might want to reoccupy that space with another program of sorts. That's an option too. So I think we have to look at everything and what's
Okay.
going to be most cost effective.
So the last thing I'm trying to remember, Anna, you can probably help me with this. What's our current reduced revenue projection from the state? How many millions are we currently looking to be reduced by? Our best guess from last year. So from last year was down how many million? Well, I'm trying to get I'm trying to look at what the increase in the BOE budget is, 1.2 million, and I'm adding to that our reduction in revenue, right? So I'm looking at what the gap is going to be. Well, the projected gap, let me put it that way.